I'm Dr. Wright. I'm an addiction psychiatrist within Atrium Health, and here to talk about some of the biology and science behind the reason we're all here: substance use problems and addiction. Right. So to get started, myself and colleagues like to think of this process with this example right here, this analogy. So we have this big, strong animal, intelligent animal. Think of it as your subconscious mind and your behaviors. We have this little itty-bitty rider up here, the conscious mind, holding the reins, being the person and the thing supposedly in control. And also a little caveat, I'm interactive with you guys, so I'll be asking questions, so don't be afraid to throw out answers, okay? So just looking at this picture, if that elephant really wanted to do something, how much could that rider do to stop him or her? Not much, right? But the illusion of control and the hopefully training and all that kind of stuff for this animal will keep that rider in control, right? But at the end of the day, if that animal decides that he doesn't want to do what the rider's wanting him to do, it's kind of hard for that rider to take control, right? So kind of keep that in mind as we go forward, right? So what do we know about this disease we call addiction, substance use problems? A lot of folks still think of it as a choice, that it's just why is my loved one, why is this person choosing this substance over me? Why can't they just put it down? It's that simple, right? Has anybody thought that phrase themselves or heard that phrase before? Right? And it's a natural reaction. I'm not going to lie, that thought of just stop. It's that just stop it. It should be that simple, but it's not. And there's various reasons why, and some of them, where it comes from is some of the reasons. So we definitely know substance problems have a genetic component. So like most everything here, I'm redheaded and now big boned. I get that from my family, right? We also get the predisposition for substance stuff a lot of times from our families. That's why in the field we ask about your brothers, your sisters, your kids, your parents, your grandparents. Did anybody that you know of have problems with substance use? Because it definitely can run in families, just like diabetes, just like cancers. It can run in families. Sometimes it pops out of nowhere. That happens as well. But there is a strong component of genetics with this disease process. Environment, where we come from, using in the home. Some places, some areas of this country, this city, it's prevalent. You go to somebody's house and people are smoking, drinking right there in the home. Toddlers, kids, all around is all over the place, right? So growing up in that, if you were that kid, how would you see smoking? Even if it's cigarettes, smoking cigarettes or smoking weed or drinking alcohol to excess or using drugs. How would you see that? It's normal. Mom and dad doing it. I came home from school, mom and dad are doing it. So starting the seeds of it's okay, it's normalized, can even start as early as childhood. All right. More and more, we're discovering the just deep impact that traumas have on not only our mind, our behaviors, as well as our body. Traumas can affect that from the moment they happen all the way for the rest of our lives. And so it's not just physical traumas, it's not just sexual abuse traumas, it also can be things like neglect. Neglect is also a traumatic event for anybody that's suffered through it. That also can have lasting effects on folks in their life. And we know when somebody has a trauma, they are much more likely to reach out to a substance, to try to appease something, to try to fill a gap, to try to do something to help with that trauma. So it's a vitally important thing to keep in mind as well. Also, the age of onset, when people first start using substance. One of the most frequent questions I ask when getting to know somebody is, when did you first partake of anything? One of the most common is that 12 to 14. I mean, how many times you'll hear somebody say, oh yeah, I picked up a cigarette at age 13 and I've been smoking ever since. Or I kind of nipped into my parents' liquor cabinet at the age of 12 and got a beer or got a shot of liquor or something, right? So we know once you start it also at an earlier age, you're also more likely to then kind of prime the pump later on. Hey, I got exposed to this, it wasn't that bad, because most people's first experiences are not as bad. And so I can continue this. So again, all these things put together are some of the ways and places where we see the origins of substance use and addiction problems setting in. So this is a little bit of the boring, possibly biology portion of the talk, and I don't want to be that science teacher that you fell asleep in the back of the class with back in the day. But just to kind of show you that there is a biological basis to what we're talking about as well. All right, so we don't give enough credit to this gray stuff that's in between our ears, but it controls all of what we do, all of what we think, all of how we behave as well. So, make sure I got there we go. So, if y'all can see it, good old brain here with all the wrinkles in it, little nose, so the person's looking that way. All right, just a little orientation. So, when we think about substance, what is it doing to the brain? How is it affecting the brain? So any substance that we can think of out there, when we take it the first time, it dumps a substance called dopamine into our system. Anybody ever heard of that term before, dopamine? All right. So what is it? Well, why is it so important? Well, dopamine is one of those chemicals in our brain that actually helps us as a person survive, but also the species survive. So it's useful, it's beneficial, it helps us do the things we need to do to stay breathing and stay alive, right? So when we find a good source of food, hey, I didn't get sick, pretty tasty, I got energy from it, dopamine. And then because of the dopamine flush, I remember that, right? Here's a source of water. I remember where that water was, what it looked like, how, was it brackish or was it actually, flowing water? I didn't get sick. Helps me survive. Even things that help, again, the species, procreation. My mom would probably blush on this one. Sex. Flood of dopamine. It's good. That's why we keep doing it, right? That's why we're all here. Somebody had it. So it keeps the species going. Dumps dopamine in our system. Okay? So when we have that first substance, it floods dopamine. But the unique properties of those substances, those naturally occurring dopamine dumps are one level. When you have a substance, it's taking it to the 10th, 1,000th, millionth degree above that. All right. So when it starts off, the dopamine actually starts back here, and all these structures, if you can see where they are, they're not on the outside. This is like the newer part of the brain. They're all in the middle, the old part of the brain, the brain that's the most primal, if you want to talk about it. So dopamine starts here. It goes here to this little NAC. That's the reward center. See how close that is? I mean, that's just like right there. So when we get dopamine, it remembers that reward. It's good. Give me some more of it. Right? These structures are also right close to the place where emotions are. This amygdala. That's where emotions are. That's where your emotions reside. And right around the amygdala is this, it's not here, but wrapped around is the hippocampus. That's where memories are made. So all these things are neighbors. So we're remembering, we're making memories, we're making connections constantly by everything we do, including when we use substances. So you use it. You use this substance, whether it be alcohol, drugs, cigarettes, whatever. It dumps this dopamine in our system, and then we start this cycle. All right? So when we don't have the substance, when we've already gone through the binge, gone through that intoxication phase, things were great, I had a great time, we start going through the negative effects of withdrawal. And this is where we start getting some of these inputs where the brain is like, well, I'm not going to really necessarily focus so much on the negatives. I'm going to really, really remember this positive. So that's why, why do you the next day have a hangover and then you go back to the bar again? Because you're not necessarily remembering this negative, you're remembering the positive. So then you want to do it again. So even just the thought of, man, I'm just going to, it's 5 o'clock somewhere, I can just hear the psh of the can, that will even just start tickling your brain with a little bit of dopamine. Just enough to say, ooh, I remember that was. I really want to get that dopamine rush again. So that's where the preoccupation, the anticipation, the thinking, the scheming, what am I going to do to get my fix? That's where this comes into play. All right? But also in the same process, over here that's acting in the front, this is the quote-unquote adulting part of your brain. This part right here in the front. This is the youngest part of the human brain. All right? It's the one that makes what we call executive function decisions. Right? It's, I probably shouldn't stay up to watch that Monday Night Football game to the conclusion because I got to get up early the next day. Right? I might be late to work, might lose a job. That's adulting. Right? That happens here. Well, what substances do is with that dopamine, it kind of comes over here, and this is also going back to that analogy of the elephant. This is the rider. That's that little man on top of the elephant. The rest of this is the elephant. This is the little man. It comes in and tells that little man, you know what? Take a break. You don't need to worry about it right now. I got it. It's good. It kind of shuts off. So the adulting part of your brain is now quiet. And now it's been driven by this other process, that primal, instinctual part of your brain. All right? And so it also kind of, ironically enough, decreases certain motivations, but also increases other motivations to get your drug. All right? So then we spin up the cycle again. We want, we find it, we get the surge, we go through the process again, and again, and again, and again. And the more it happens, the more it gets solidified. And now you can see it's starting to drive itself. It's becoming its own motor. So then, can you come and say, just stop? Has anybody ever seen somebody on a bike and said, you know what, I'm going to put my arm in the middle of that tire to make it stop? Would you do that? I wouldn't. I like my fingers and toes. All right? But that's what we're expecting when we say to somebody, just stop. All right? So as we were mentioning about the amounts of dopamine that gets flooded into our system, again, just a bunch of data points for you guys, but the take home is all these substances, amphetamines, cocaine, morphine, nicotine, are dumping so much dopamine into your system that it's hard to overcome with natural stuff when this is in your system. All right? So again, that prefrontal cortex, that writer, that adulting brain is going through some problems and issues itself when substances are involved, right? So responses to the drug-related cues, that's where we talk about triggers and seeing, smelling, pot is starting that process. Tasting the alcohol is starting that process. You've made the connection. And so again, your brain is starting to dump your system with that dopamine, right? But it reaches out to other things too. Again, all those things are connected to the memory and the other processes. So even things that aren't directly related to substances get connected. So my dealer of weed, she's got this old beat up Oldsmobile. So then I see an Oldsmobile. Heck, even I start hearing an old clunker car coming down the road, my brain has made connections from here back to using. So even hearing that triggers my brain and say, you know what? I think I might call my dealer to get some weed. Or I need to go find my dealer to get some crack. Or get some heroin. So it doesn't even have to be necessarily directly connected to the substance. Your brain has made connections. All right? So again, as we talked about, it's also quieting down that writer. It's starting to take away the brakes that your body has put in place as far as, that's not a good decision. Maybe I shouldn't do that today. Maybe it's not a good idea. Maybe I'll just do it tomorrow. It takes away that inhibition, and you become much more impulsive and impulsive and impulsive. Right? And this disease we call addiction is one of the most complex and downright frustrating illnesses you can think of, because it's one of the only illnesses that actually impairs your knowledge that you are getting sick, and you're getting sicker, and you're getting sicker, and you're getting sicker. Right? So if any one of us here in this room started having chest pains after we were running, I saw some runners earlier, what would be the first thing you do if you started having chest pains when you're running? Stop running. Then what? Hopefully call for some help. Maybe this isn't quite right. I'm going to go see the doctor. Right? Do folks that suffer from substance issues always immediately go to the doctor when they have problems? So it's one of the only things that makes you think, I'm not bad. I'm okay. It's not that bad. I just need X. I just need to get through the day, and how I can get through the day, I'll use a little bit of opiates. That's all I need, right? Or I just need a little bit of a nip of alcohol, and I can make it through. It doesn't let us see how sick we're becoming. Right? So again, it's the paradox of addiction and illnesses in this whole spectrum that we're talking about, because it's damaging that reward center. It's damaging those parts of the brain that are seeing the value in other things that are just as pleasurable. And it takes over this drive to want to be healthier. Instead, it wants you to become sicker and sicker, to use that substance again and again and again and again. So what do we do as the medical field? So one of the things we're trying to get back to a normal balance of dopamine. Instead of all this external stuff that's causing dopamine, getting to the point where you yourself, as a person, can understand and feel that normal things can be just as pleasurable. But that's hard because there's so much dopamine from those other things. So until that happens, it's going to be really hard. All right. So hopefully one of biggest take homes for you guys, and you've heard it, you've heard me say it, you've heard Jerry say it, is that this is a disease. All right, some people, again, think it's a moral failing. They think it's a pure on choice every single time, but it is a disease. And why do we say that? Because disease, the word disease has definition to it, has components to it, right? So first part of a disease is you have a problem. All right, I think we can all say that, alcohol, substance use is a problem, right? We've talked about diseases, they have a biological basis. Ad nauseum, what I was just talking about, right? There's biology to it. Identifiable signs and symptoms. Tony and our loved one families here have talked about the signs and symptoms that somebody suffers when they have a disease process, this addiction process. The things that were on that list, that's the signs and symptoms of somebody having the disease of addiction. So if we think about things like diabetes and hypertension and cancers, we also know that there's a very predictable course and what's going to happen. So if you didn't get treated for your diabetes, what's going to happen? Gets worse. What else? I mean, like specifics. Do y'all know what happens if you have uncontrolled diabetes? Potentially, that is the ultimate bad outcome over here, right? But you can lose limbs. You can start losing eyesight. Other things happen, right? And then eventually, we march down toward the death, right? What if our loved one doesn't get help for addiction? Ultimately, we could die, right? So we know there's a predictable course. But we also know with diseases, if you get treatment, you can get better. That's what I think a lot of folks don't really grasp, is that there is treatment, there is help for addiction, and you can get better. But it's so frustrating that they overlook it or they don't think it's there. But treatment is there, and it can help. Okay? So what does treatment look like? Again, because we think about this as a chronic disease process, there's quite a few things that we try to do during treatment. So we try to bring back and enhance function, because again, in the disease process, we've lost a lot of stuff, potentially, right? Again, we want to optimize the motivation toward people not using. Why would I mean, life was good when I'm using, right? Why are you saying life is better without it? Because they don't remember. They don't remember that you can have just as much pleasure and good out of life when you're not using. And as a psychiatrist, part of what I do day in and day out is trying to restructure, reframe, re-engage you in your life without substances. How does that look? How can you get there? What are the steps we need to take to get you there? And then, of course, a very important component as well is how do we prevent you from falling back again? And that can be just as important and sometimes overlooked, but just as important. All right. So with interventions, we know that there's actually science-based, evidence-based ways of treating and having therapy for addictions. One of them, cognitive behavioral therapy, changing the way we think and behave, interact with each other. We know that can be helpful. Motivational enhancement. So anybody here ever come across somebody in addiction that just didn't care, didn't want to? Like, I'm fine. Right? There's a technique that gets them to have that motivation again, to turn on that switch of, you know what, I do want to have help. I do want to change things. My life really is not as good as I want it to be. Right? Community reinforcement and marital family counseling. You all are here because this disease is not isolated to the person. It affects everybody else, not just them. It's a community thing. It's a spousal thing. It's a brotherly, sisterly thing, a kid thing, a mother thing. It affects all of us when it happens, right? So we also got to think, we got to make sure we're keeping that support structure in mind, and how do we help the people that are involved? You guys. Because as Tony was saying, the addict and the co-addict, there's a relationship there. All right. Again, as a doctor, as an MD at the back of the room as well, there are medications for certain substances that can be helpful. Now, certain substances don't. We're still working on that. But there are things that can help. All right. And just because somebody is making use of these substances and these medications to help doesn't mean that the recovery is not as good as somebody else's, or that they're cheating the system to get in recovery. It just means they're making use of something to help. So if I were that same diabetic, I was to say, you know what? You are So you're just switching out your cake with that insulin. Does that make a lot of sense? We're not going to tell that diabetic, you know what, you don't need that insulin, you're just getting hooked on it. We wouldn't say that. But we know that insulin helps them get better, right? It helps them stay stable. Same thing with these medications. But it's getting their body to a place where their mind can then actually be focused on treatment. Because if your body is going through withdrawal and having all these symptoms, there's no way you can pay attention and learn stuff. I mean, it's just impossible. Who's hungry right now or thirsty? So is it kind of hard to still pay attention? That stomach rumbling a little bit? Thank you. But in general, it's hard, right? I mean, in class, that's why we want to feed our kids before they go to school so they can pay attention in class. Same thing. But it's not just about class. This is about a person's life. So we want to make sure their body's doing well so their mind can then pay attention to get in recovery. All right? So that's the whole basis and background of all these medications that can help. All right? So they are there. All right? So again, kind of going back real quick to that illness thing and just, again, visual, because, again, my mom was an art teacher. I'm a visual person, right? So, and I apologize, that should be an S. Yeah. Is when we have somebody that comes in with high blood pressure, we put them on blood pressure medicine. Hey, their blood pressure's down. It's doing great. They stop their blood pressure medicine. Goes back up. What do we say? Hey, the treatment was working here, right? But if we have that same kind of thought down here, somebody comes in with active addiction. They get into recovery, whatever that recovery looks like. They relapse. What's one of the first things we say? That recovery didn't work. Why'd you do that? It didn't work. But it did. It did here. We got to prevent this part. And part of the issue with addiction too is it's what we call a remitting and relapsing disease, like cancer. It can come back. We have to be vigilant to prevent that from happening. It can happen, and it may will. Sometimes multiple times before folks get into a long, long stretch of recovery. But just because they have that happen doesn't mean recovery and treatment was not working. All right? So one of the big take-home, recovery works, there's hope, there's people out there that really care and are there to help. All right? So the SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Service Administration, long title from the government, says, what is recovery? It's a process of change to improve health and wellness, to lead a life of full potential. Kind of cut that down. But take home, it's a process. It's not, okay, you've gone through a 28-day program, abracadabra, you were cured. I wish it were that way, but it's not. It's a process. All right? And so like any process, like any treatment, there's multiple ways to get there. So none of us in this room are the same person, right? I like to think I'm handsome, but none of you look like me, and that's a good thing, right? So we're all different. Recoveries for each person can look different. So just because somebody may benefit from one way of recovery, that's great. Applaud them, hooray. That doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody. So it's finding that recovery system that works for the individual person. And it may take a couple of instances to find it, but they are there, okay? So I'm sorry that y'all had the experience where some professionals weren't supportive of Al-Anon or Nar-Anon. I'd like to go kick them in the rear because that's a great organization. AAs are a great organization. NAs are a great organization. Celebrate Recoveries. All kinds of support groups. But again, that's just one part of it. There's other ways as well. All right, so just keeping an open mind about the recovery process. So I want to thank everybody, lastly, that's in this room, because everybody here is hopefully in the process of trying to turn the tide of stigma. Because, again, as a psychiatrist, one of the big stigmas for mental health, we're starting to see that fade away. People are starting to talk about depressions, anxieties, bipolarity, schizophrenia in the general population, and that's great. We're having that conversation. But if we can have that same conversation with substance, because how many times have you been kind of ashamed and guilt of not talking about it, or being afraid that, if you open your mouth, somebody would look at you differently because your loved one has a problem, or you yourself have a problem with addiction. We need to start having the same kind of conversations with substance that we have for mental health, with diabetes, again, going back to that. So thank you all for coming here, and hopefully continue to spread the word that it is something to talk about, that it is something to know that there is help out there, and we're all here to try to help you guys and your families get there.
So one more time, in your package is this PowerPoint here. And if you go halfway through it, it starts with the slide up on the screen. Okay, so keep turning until you get to this, and we'll follow in. Let me just fix this, and we are good to go. So how can you spot somebody who's struggling with addiction? Well, let's look at some of these items that are on the PowerPoint in your package. Let's look at number one. They steal money. Maybe they don't steal money. Maybe they break into your house and steal things, and they pawn those things. Look at number three. They change the people that they hang out with. And suddenly they're hanging out with a different crowd, and you're not comfortable with that crowd, but you see them doing that. Look at number 8. They start missing work, school. They're asking you to call the boss and tell the boss that they don't feel well and will you cover for them. And you know they're not sick. You know they're just recovering from last night's drinking binge, and they're asking you to cover up for them or make excuses. They lie. I have a former coworker who's got 30 years of recovery under her belt, and she has said to me, how can you tell when an alcoholic is lying? Their lips are moving. And this is from her. Lots of broken promises and lots of manipulation. They're so, so charming. And they look at you with eyes that are so sincere. And they say, but I'm serious. If you'll just help me in this one situation, I promise to go to AA meetings. And they don't. Well, let's look at what addictive behavior is really all about. Number 2 is huge. An addict has difficulty following a project through from beginning to end. They start a lot of things, but what they start, they never finish. Number 8 and 13 are tied into one another. They overreact to changes over which they have no control. And so when something bad goes on in their life, they don't pray the serenity prayer, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Instead, they just do something. At the Charlotte Rescue Mission, if something bad happens, they decide to pack up their bags and leave. And as they walk through the front doors of the mission with no place to sleep that night, they suddenly realize, where are they going to sleep? And they turn around and look at us and say, can we stay? And our answer is no. Look at number 12 and 11 and 12. Number 11 is textbook of addictive behavior. An addict lives in pendulum swings. They're either to far left or far right. And they only know normal for the 1 second when it goes from extreme left to extreme right. So they live in extreme pendulum swings. Number 12 is huge because they're loyal. The person they're not loyal to is themselves. They're loyal to everybody else. You may have had someone in your life and you say, why are you dating that person? And their answer is always what? Because I love them. And really, they just want to stay in that relationship. This is where it all really comes together. And I want you to look at the addict. And Dr. Wright is going to talk about the medical aspects of addiction a little bit later. But I want to talk about some of the emotional aspects of addiction. And when an addict is not used and they have something that kind of goes over their head, which is the word shame. Guilt says I've done something wrong. Shame says I am wrong. I'm defective. If you knew me, you wouldn't like me. If God knew me, God wouldn't like me. And so every time they act out with alcohol and drugs, I listed other drugs of choice over here. And yes, while today we're talking about alcohol and drugs, work, power, sex, food, religion, gambling, and rage are all drugs of choice. And when the person uses any of those, for them, they feel relief. But it's like they took a hand grenade and threw it into this room, and now you're bleeding because of the shrapnel. But they don't care because at least they have peace, they have serenity from the shame. Unfortunately, they sober up, and they have to act out again. And what's the co-addict addicted to? Well, they're addicted to the addict. That literally is their drug of choice, to worry, to sadness. It's interesting that, the Al-Anon salute, as we like to say, is when the co-addict puts their wrists on their forehead and said, oh, you really don't understand what I've gone through with my whoever in their life. And what happens is that this relationship is truly backwards. I want to demonstrate something that all of us learned in 7th grade, and let this pen represent me, and let this remote control represent the cutest girl in 7th grade, who finally realizes that I'm the hottest guy in 7th grade, right? So 7th grade on the playground, she starts to chase me, and what do? I run away. She chases me, and what do? I run away. She chases me, and what do? I run away. And then she says, Tony's not that cute. And she starts to go this way, and what do I go? Oh, she's really cute. And she goes this way, and I go, no, she's really cute. And she pulls aside further, and I go, no, she's really hot. What did I learn in 7th grade that we lost in 9th grade when they were teaching us quadratic equations? That the person who wants the relationship the least owns it. So look at this diagram right here between the addict and the co-addict. Who wants the relationship the most? The co-addict. Who wants the relationship the least? The addict. Who owns the relationship? The addict. Until you're willing to change things around and invert this relationship, nothing in your addict's life is going to change. They will lie, they will charm, they will manipulate you, but until you're willing to say the words no, nothing but nothing is going to happen. So what does a co-addict struggle with? Well, there's a couple things on your screen there. One is that they avoid conflict. They want peace at all costs. They cannot say the word no. And if they do say the word no, no is because. Well, no, you can't borrow my car because you always leave French fries on the floor. No, you can't borrow my car because you leave the gas tank empty. And they confuse that with Christian charity. They're constantly seeking approval and affirmation. They want everybody to like them. And they think that this is kind, this is Christian, all these other things. And number 4, they stay in a relationship way too long. We have an expression that says that nothing is too much trouble, is too costly, if it will help the person that we are involved with. Let me say this again, that nothing is too much trouble, that nothing is too costly, or nothing is too expensive if it will help the person that we are involved with. So it becomes what we're going to call, if you turn to your next slide, a counterintuitive model. And what you think hurts your loved one helps them, and what you think helps your loved one hurts them. You may think that bailing them out of jail is a good thing, but bailing them out of jail teaches them that they can be irresponsible because someone will always cover up the mess. Yes, you can get the car back from the repo man so that it doesn't get sold on auction, but it teaches them I don't have to be responsible for car payments because somebody will always bail me out. And so what we think helps that person actually hurts them. But when we say, no, you can't borrow my car, no, I'm not going to pay for this, I'm sorry, I'm going to leave you in jail, what you think hurts them actually helps them. So what do I want? I want you to learn to let go. Let's look at a number of these. Letting go does not mean to stop caring. It means I can't do it for somebody else. The phrase that I like to use is, I'm going to honor your decision to do blank. What are you going to do about it? And that's the phrase I like to teach folks. I'm going to honor your decision to leave the rescue mission. I'm going to honor your decision to have 6 beers and get a DUI. I'm going to honor your decision to do something totally irresponsible. What are you going to do about it? And for an addict, they don't want to do anything about it. They want you to make the bad go away. Look at number 2. It's not to cut myself off. It's the realization I cannot control another person. We try to control the universe. And I've had folks who tried to get their loved ones into the rescue mission get mad at me because the admission didn't happen this afternoon because their loved one was maybe in jail. And they're trying to control the universe, thinking that this is caring and Christian. It's not. Look at number 4. It's to admit powerless, which means the outcome is not in my hands. I like the Al-Anon expression that says, I didn't cause it, I can't cure it, and I can't control it. Let me say that again. I didn't cause it, I can't cure it, and I can't control it. And number 6, it is not to care for, but to care about. And the phrase that I like to use is, I'm responsible to others, I'm not responsible for others. Let me say that again. I'm responsible to others, I'm not responsible for others. Lots of times when I'll be doing a presentation with a large crowd, I'll pick on the back row, and I said, I was responsible to be here on time, to have something to challenge you, but I'm not responsible for you. Whether you're taking notes on what I'm teaching or working on your grocery shopping list is none of my business. I was only responsible to be here. I'm not responsible for you. Let's look at the next page. Whoops. And what did I just do? Wrong button. Number 9. It is not to be in the middle arranging all the outcomes, but to allow others to affect their own destinies. I often ask folks that, what if you lived in a university city of Charlotte and your loved one shift work 4 a.m. to noon on Westinghouse Boulevard, and they got their 3rd DUI? Would you get up at 3:15 in the morning to drive them to work because there's no CATS buses? And every time I ask that question, 85% of the people in the room say, yes, I would get up because it takes the 2 of us to pay the bills. And I'll say to them, the most loving thing you can do for that person is not get up at 3:15 in the morning, but take them to Walmart and buy them a bicycle. And every time I say bicycle, the whole room goes, oh, I can't do that. But the most loving thing you can do is go to Walmart, buy them a bicycle, get them a helmet and a water bottle, but remind them it's a 4-hour bicycle ride from University City area to Westinghouse Boulevards. And lastly, number 10, it is not to be protective, it's to permit another to face reality. Imagine somebody, they're making a movie and somebody's jumping off a building. And there's no way that the director would allow the person to fall off even a 5-story building and land on the concrete. They would die in real life. So what does the director do? They put a big blue air pillow on the ground. And the person is confident to fall off the roof and lands on the big blue air pillow. The director moves the big blue air pillow. The person lays on the ground, does their death and dying scene, and that's what you see in the movie. You see, for every addict, there is a big blue air pillow. And they know that they can fall off the building of irresponsible living, knowing that no matter how irresponsible they are, that there's a big blue air pillow they will land on, and someone else will make the bad of their life go away. What I need you to do is unscrew that valve, let the air out, and when they fall, they hit bottom, and that's when their life changes. There's lots of resources there in your kit. I'm going to take us back to what this is really all about. It was my opening slide. Someone you love struggles with addiction, and we want you to know that you're not alone.